When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991 after decades of communist rule, it was a monumental event full of hope and new possibilities. The Cold War ended and political, economic, and military alliances that had shaped the world for nearly half a century were reformulated practically overnight. The Soviet Union's fiercest enemy, the United States, hailed the fall as a victory for democracy and evidence of capitalism's superiority over socialism. For the majority of Russians, the transition to market system was painful, chaotic, and anything but democratic. Amidst the confusion over the country's reorganization, however, a few shrewd businessmen rose to the top. In just a few short years, Russia's crown jewels became the private possessions of a small group of men who have come to be known as the Russian Oligarchs. Unlike the 19th century American robber barons who built their monopolies from the wilderness, Russia's oligarchs amassed their control and wealth from existing enterprises. With few exceptions, Russia's oligarchs built nothing new. The men had varying backgrounds. Some were factory managers who during Russia's transition forced their employees to sell them their shares in the once state-owned enterprises. Others were senior government officials, while yet others were underground businessmen on the margins of society. All shared a common thirst for money and power, and latter of which included establishing or maintaining connections to the political elite in Russia, a country where the rule of law is still sometimes trumped by the rule of in-laws. Russia today, just a handful of oligarchs control 85% of the value of the country's leading private companies. And with their multi-billion-dollar fortunes, they are joining the top ranks of the world's wealthiest people. Meet a few of Russia's most powerful and influential business tycoons. Roman Abramovich, 37-year-old, one of the youngest and most influential of Russia's oligarchs, remained largely unknown until recently. A few people even knew what Abramovich, once called the stealth oligarch, looked like. One newspaper offered a reward to the first person to photograph him. Born in 1966 on the Volga, Abramovich was orphaned at the age of 4 and spent most of his adolescence with his grandparents in a bleak western Siberian town 700 miles north of Moscow. After a brief stint in the Soviet army, he made plastic toys and started up an automobile parts cooperative. He attended the Gubkin Institute of Oil and Gas in Moscow, then traded commodities for Runicom, a Swiss trading company. Abramovich attributes much of his success to the patronage of oil magnate Boris Berezovsky, who introduced him to the Yeltsin's inner circle. By 1996, Abramovich joined the board of directors for Sibneft, Berezovsky's most prized oil holding, and was later put in charge of the company's Moscow offices. After Berezovsky fell out of favor with the new Putin regime, Abramovich took over his patron's oil assets and the country's largest television network. In 2000, Abramovich expanded his empire to form the multi-billion-dollar company Russian Aluminium, while also branching out into politics. First winning a seat in the State Duma, Abramovich then became governor of Chukotka, a position he had held for 2 years. The desolate Russian province has become a sort of personal project for Abramovich. He has spent tens of millions of dollars of his own money building new homes, supermarkets, hotels, and cinemas in Chukotka. Critics say his real motives are control over the region's natural resources and perhaps greater political aspirations. Abramovich's assets are managed offshore through his investment fund Millhouse Capital, located in Britain, which Abramovich seems to be slowly making his home. Boris Berezovsky, 57-year-old helped to popularize the term oligarch and is perhaps the most controversial of the group. Born in Moscow in 1946, Berezovsky was the only child of a factory builder and pediatric nurse. He earned his PhD in mathematics and physics and landed his first research position at the prestigious Institute of Control Sciences. Berezovsky, by his own admission, wasn't a brilliant scientist, but he was an ambitious and skilled networker, constantly giving speeches and organizing seminars and trips abroad. He began in business selling and importing computer software, then cars. Berezovsky made his first millions from assets of a state auto manufacturer, AvtoVAZ. Later, he took over the management of the Russian airline Aeroflot, the oil company Sibneft, much of Russia's aluminum industry, and ORT, the state's largest and most influential television network. Through his close relationship with the longtime chief of staff to Boris Yeltsin, Berezovsky became part of the former president's inner circle. In 1996, he led Russia's most powerful tycoons to back Yeltsin's re-election. Yeltsin appointed Berezovsky Deputy Secretary of the National Security Council, then Secretary of the Organization for Coordinating the Commonwealth of Independent States. In 1999, he won a seat in the State Duma, but 6 months later, amid unrelenting pressure from new regime of President Vladimir Putin, Berezovsky resigned and soon fled Russia. The Russian Prosecutor General's office charged Berezovsky in absentia with complicity to fraud, complicity not to return hard currency from abroad, and money laundering. He now lives in self-imposed exile in France and Britain. In March, Berezovsky was arrested on the warrant alleging that he defrauded the Russian region of Samara of nearly $2 billion in 1994 and 1995. After the arrest, the London court granted Berezovsky political asylum, protecting him from extradition. Oleg Deripaska, born in 1968, is Russia's youngest billionaire at the age of 35. Deripaska accumulated a business empire through a series of ruthless and elaborate, though technically legal, takeover raids. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, he was a 23-year-old student at the Moscow State University. He soon got a job in the fledgling metals trading market. By 1994, he was a chief financial officer of Aluminium Product. Through the company, he bought a stake in the Siberian smelter plant, beginning his ascent to the top of one of Russia's roughest industries. Deripaska became the plant's manager to protect it from takeover by its former owner, who once threatened him with a grenade launcher. Later, Deripaska waged his own revolt to take over the shares of the London-based Transworld Group, then owned by controversial multimillionaire Mikhail Chernoy. A fellow oligarch, Roman Abramovich, became Deripaska's partner in early 2000. The two created a joint venture called Russian Aluminium. Today, Russian Aluminium has a $4 billion in annual sales and is one world's second largest aluminium producer. Deripaska owns 75% of the company. His other businesses include power stations, Russia's largest car and commercial vehicle manufacturer, and the country's largest insurance company.